Hey, it's Sean Foster, and you should watch Hollywood Week because it's such a beautiful collaboration of phenomenal artists from around the world. Hey y'all, it's Sean Foster, and we're getting ready to open for Mr. Joe Nichols here in Troy, Ohio. But I wanted to hop on real quick and thank y'all so much for all of the streams,
The house lights dim, the roar of 10 million viewers fades into a hum, and the air in the studio turns cold. Before John Foster steps into the blinding white circle of the American Idol stage, he does something the cameras rarely catch. He reaches into the pocket of his denim jacket, his fingers brushing against a weathered, yellowing piece of paper. To the world, he is the valedictorian with the golden voice, the man who brought neo-traditional country back to the mainstream. But in that private moment, he is just a boy from Addis, Louisiana, carrying the weight of a tragedy that remains frozen in time. On New Year's Eve 2022, a horrific accident claimed the lives of his dear friends Maggie Dunn and Caroline Gill. It was a night that should have ended his story before it even began. Instead, that darkness became the fuel for a fire that would eventually burn through the television screens of every home in America. But as the music starts, a haunting question remains. Is he singing for the fans, or for the ghosts who never got to hear him win? In the quiet halls of LSU, John Foster wasn't known as a star. He was known as a scholar. A biology major with a focus on oncology, his life was mapped out in textbooks and laboratory slides. He wanted to cure the world, to heal the sick, and to find answers in the precision of science. Yet beneath the lab coat beat the heart of a 90s country traditionalist.
While his peers were chasing modern pop trends and digital fame, John was studying the phrasing of George Strait and the grit of Alan Jackson. When he finally decided to audition, many industry insiders whispered that he was a relic. They claimed his sound was dead on arrival, a vintage soul in a world obsessed with auto-tune and viral TikTok dances. But John knew something the critics didn't. He understood that America wasn't looking for a new sound. They were looking for an old feeling. He stepped onto that stage not just to sing, but to prove that the roots of a man are stronger than the whims of a trend, even if it meant risking a prestigious medical career for a dream that had no guarantee of success. The paper in his pocket wasn't just a memento, it was a prophecy. Years before the world knew his name, Maggie Dunn sat in a junior English class and wrote a letter that would eventually change the course of music history. In her neat, youthful handwriting, she predicted that John would be the next Elvis Presley. She saw a star in him long before he saw one in himself, and she urged him never to let the world silence his voice. When she was taken in that tragic 2022 accident, the letter became more than a memory. It became a mandate. Every time John faced a judge's critique or a grueling rehearsal, he felt the psychological weight of those words. It was a heavy burden to carry, living up to the expectations of someone who was no longer there to see the dream come true.
This hidden North Star kept him grounded, while the chaos of Hollywood tried to pull him apart. He wasn't just competing for a title, he was fulfilling a promise made in a classroom years ago, a promise that the world was about to see him keep on the grandest stage imaginable. Hollywood wasn't ready for the man from West Baton Rouge Parish. While other contestants arrived with stylists and rehearsed backstories, John Foster arrived with a collar of pastelaya and the genuine warmth of a Louisiana Sunday. He didn't just walk into the room, he brought an entire culture with him. This Cajun charm wasn't a calculated gimmick, it was a shield. In an industry known for being manufactured and cold, John was a burst of humidity and soul. He spoke of the levees, the small-town values, and the simple joy of a home-cooked meal. The judges were initially skeptical, wondering if his gumbo and guitar persona could actually translate to a national audience. But as he opened his mouth to sing, the skepticism vanished. He used his Southern identity to create an immediate, unbreakable bond with the viewers. He made the massive, sterile stage feel like a front porch in Addis. It was the beginning of a cultural movement, a reminder that authenticity is the rarest currency in entertainment. Yet, as his popularity soared, the pressure to remain the simple country boy began to clash with the reality of his rising fame. Every season has a moment where a contestant stops being a performer and becomes a symbol. For John, that moment arrived during the Easter episode. It was supposed to be a standard night of competition, but when he stood alone in the spotlight to perform an original tribute, the atmosphere in the room shifted. He didn't just sing, he bared his soul to the millions watching. As he poured his grief for Maggie and Caroline into the microphone, the reality TV mask slipped away. The performance went viral within minutes, sparking a national conversation about loss, healing, and the power of art. He became the first contestant in years to transcend the genre, reaching people who didn't even like country music. But behind the scenes, the emotional toll was devastating. Reliving his darkest night on national television was a double-edged sword. While America was healing through his voice, John was being forced to reopen wounds that had never truly closed. He was becoming a hero to the heartbroken, but the cost of that crown was beginning to show in the weary lines around his eyes. The season 23 finale wasn't just a battle between two singers, it was a clash of American musical philosophies. On one side stood Jamal Roberts, a powerhouse of modern R&B and vocal gymnastics. On the other stood John Foster, the sentinel of 90s country traditionalism. The tension was palpable.
This was a cultural debate played out in real time. Do we move toward the future of pop, or do we return to the honesty of the past? John refused to adapt his style to fit the American Idol mold. He didn't use pyrotechnics or backup dancers. He used a guitar and the truth. As the voting narrowed, a silent majority of viewers emerged, propelling the biology student from Louisiana into a top 2 position that stunned the coastal elites. Even when the results were announced and he was named the runner-up, the air in the room didn't feel like a defeat. It felt like a shift in the tectonic plates of the music industry. John had proven that his sound wasn't a relic, it was a revival. But as the confetti settled, the world wondered, would he follow the Nashville machine, or would he vanish back into the shadows of the bayou? When the cameras finally turned off, the silence was deafening. Most runners-up immediately signed high-gloss record deals and moved to Los Angeles, but John Foster did the unthinkable. He went home. For months, the industry was buzzing with rumors. Was he quitting? Had the pressure been too much? Instead of red carpets, John was seen working at his family's meat market and quietly returning to his studies at LSU. This was the medical crossroads, a period of intense internal conflict where he had to choose between the stability of oncology and the volatility of the music business. Labels were desperate to sign him, but John was wary of being manufactured.
He spent his days weighing the precision of science against the raw emotion of the stage. Insiders whispered that he was walking away from a $1 million career to find his peace. This period of silence only fueled his legend, making his fans even more desperate for his return. He was the man who had the world at his feet and chose to walk back to the mud of the levee, leaving everyone to wonder if the next Elvis was actually going to be a doctor instead. On June 7, 2025, the mystery was finally solved. The most sacred circle in country music, the Grand Ole Opry, announced that John Foster would be making his debut. It was the night the circle was truly completed. Walking onto that stage, John wasn't just a reality star, he was a peer to legends. When he stepped into the spotlight to perform a duet with Carrie Underwood, the emotion in the room was overwhelming. He didn't just sing the notes, he sang with the authority of someone who had survived the storm. The old guard of Nashville, usually skeptical of television-made stars, stood in unison. They saw in him the savior of the genre's traditional roots, a man who could bridge the gap between the legends of the past and the listeners of the future. It was a formal coronation, a blessing from the industry that had once doubted him. As he looked out into the crowd, he knew that his detour into the meat market and the classroom had been necessary. He wasn't just a singer anymore. He was a guardian of a legacy.
But even as he conquered Nashville, a new global challenge was beginning to take shape across the ocean. By the start of 2026, John Foster had become something much larger than a country singer. He was an international cultural ambassador. On New Year's Day,
He stood atop the Gulf to Gumbo float at the Rose Parade, his voice echoing across the streets of Pasadena to a global audience of millions. The Cajun invasion had gone worldwide. Suddenly, the boy from Addis was selling out venues in Switzerland, Canada, and the United Kingdom. We analyze the 2026 tour data and see a staggering trend. Traditional American country music was finding a massive, hungry audience in places no one expected. John was exporting the soul of Louisiana to the world, proving that stories of heartbreak and resilience are a universal language. Yet, despite the private jets and international acclaim, he remained remarkably unchanged. He was still the same man who carried a letter in his pocket and a love for the bayou in his heart. But as he traveled further from home, the psychological strain of the road began to clash with his desire for the simple life he had left behind, leading to a revelation that would stun his growing fan base. As we look at John Foster today, the question isn't whether he will be a doctor or a singer, it's how he became both. He has mastered the science of the human heart.
With his 2026 studio album on the horizon, and his enduring relationship with high school sweetheart Brooklyn Borke, John has found a balance that few in his position ever achieve. He didn't just survive the tragedy of 2022, he made it meaningful. He didn't just survive the machine of Hollywood, he made it authentic. The Elvis prophecy in Maggie's letter wasn't about the fame or the jumpsuits, it was about the impact. John Foster has become a living testament to the idea that our greatest detours often lead us to our true destination. Whether he eventually returns to oncology or spends the rest of his life on a tour bus, his legacy is already secure. He is the man who turned a national loss into a national song, ensuring that Maggie and Caroline live on every time he touches that yellowed piece of paper in his pocket. The spotlight may be bright, but for John, the most important light is the one that shines from the memories of the friends who believed in him before the world ever did.